Okay, hello YouTube. Today I'm going to answer a question that I get asked a lot, just by people that I know and friends of mine, which is how do you play against the dragon? So after e4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4, cd4, knight d4, knight f6, knight c3, we're going to go into the dragon variation of the Sicilian, and I'm going to basically try to answer how I handle playing the white side of the dragon, especially considering that I like to play the dragon with black, and I use the dragon as my main line. So if you like content like this and you want to see more of it, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button and click on your notification icon. Now, in everybody's opening repertoire, at some place, at some point, your opening repertoire has to basically meet. And this is just one of the most annoying things in the world, is basically at some point you have to play against yourself. There's just no way around it. You have to play against your own preparation. So the ideal is that you want to play a position when your opening repertoire intersects. You want to try to play a position that you actually like playing with both colors, that you think is perfectly acceptable for both colors. So I don't actually play like a main line against the dragon. I actually play a sideline against the dragon. And this is a way that a lot of people handle it, just to kind of avoid playing against themselves a whole lot as they play a sideline. And they also try to play a sideline that they think is acceptable for both sides. And that's kind of the way that I handle playing against my favorite opening. So after bishop e3, bishop g7, pawn to f3, we're going to go into a mainline Yugoslav, knight c6, queen d2, castles kingside, and then I typically castle queenside here. And today we're going to be covering the main move, which is the move pawn to d5. The old move of, knight d4, bishop e6 isn't supposed to be black's best try anymore. White's just supposed to have a comfortable advantage in these lines. Apparently, there's a number of ways to get a comfortable advantage against it, too. So those lines aren't supposed to be all that great. So the main move that we have to worry about here is the move pawn to d5. So when I have to face castles queenside, I of course also play pawn to d5, so this is where my opening repertoire intersects. I have to play both sides of it, but when I play the white pieces, I tend to play this sideline with white. The sideline that I play with white is I play knight c6 here, and then after bc6 I play bishop h6, and basically I'm just kind of playing for mate against the black king from this position moving forward. And this is apparently a totally acceptable sideline. And it's one that actually some top players have played before with the white pieces. Guys like Ian Nepomniachtchi have played this with white. And I actually came up with a lot of these lines and a lot of these variations independently before a lot of these top GMs started playing it. So like a lot of my stuff kind of predates their stuff, but the idea has been around for a while, so it's a cool idea. We play bishop h6, and we just basically try to play for mate. So one of the main ideas here for white is white wants to play e5 at some point, kick away this f6 knight with the pawn, and then just kind of play h4, h5, hg, and then, we're just playing for mate. This is the idea. And so there's a lot of complications, and there's a lot of different ways that this can go, but let's just take a look at some of black's main tries. So, the main try, in my mind, what is still the main line and what was the main line many years ago, was just bishop takes h6 here, queen takes h6, and then queen b6. I think this is really the main attempt for black to get something out of this position, but there are other attempts that are kind of interesting. One interesting try in this position is just something like bishop e6 instead of playing bishop takes h6. So we could have bishop e6 in this position, and I used to think that bishop g7, king g7, and then e5 was one of the ways to go here. But it turns out there is one variation that black can play that should lead to slight edge black. After knight d7, h4, h5, bishop e2 was part of my prep. Knight d4, g4 was in fact part of my prep. Hg, h5 was part of my prep. Rook h8, fg, and queen d6 is apparently supposed to be slight edge black. I mean, even after rook on d to g1, which seems natural, rook a b8, b3, queen b4 is advantage black, somewhere between major and decisive advantage black at this point. And I don't know a great way around this line, to be completely honest. I don't know a great way around it or a great way to play it. I do like other variations that black can try here. White seems to get a good game against those. But for the most part, it seems like e5 is not incredibly sound. But fortunately for us, there is this alternative option to continue playing for this attack. We just exchange on d5, and then we just play pawn to g4. So white can apparently play for an attack this way, and this is supposed to be fine. So one example would be something like queen c7. We could play h4, h5, and then we're going to play g5, and here we just simply snap the pawn. We just grab a pawn, and we just kind of hold on to this pawn for dear life. Now here the computer actually gives major advantage white this entire time. It thinks that grabbing this extra pawn, and of course relieving black of his dark-squared bishop earlier on, and then taking these dark squares with pawns, is just such a great and spectacular thing for white that white has some sort of major advantage here. I'm a little bit more sedate about it. I'm willing to say slight edge white, but I'm not going to pretend like black doesn't have counterplay here. Black has a lot of counterplay along the DNC files, and that is counterplay that we maybe need to be nervous about. So like rook d8, bishop e2 is good. Rook c8, we have to play c3, so we're already weakening our position a little bit. King g8, queen e4, e6, rook d3 is possible because there is no knight c5 because we exchange with check. We play rook d8 check, and we consolidate our position into a winning advantage. That's why the computer recommends king h7 to basically knight c5 is on, so we have to avoid that. We have to play queen e3, and then finally white will play the other piece into the game. He'll play rook hd1, and if white manages to trade off a bunch of pieces, this is just a completely winning endgame for white. Then it looks like white should have some sort of potential to do that in this position, since he's got both rooks on the open file and everything seems pretty active. Like I said, the computer gives major advantage white. I'm a little bit more sedate. I'm willing to say slight edge white, but, black does seem to have a lot of play in this position. But needless to say, that's one of the reasons I don't consider bishop e6 the main line. So bishop takes h6 should definitely be considered the main line, and this is the position that I'm willing to play with both colors. And then after queen takes h6, the main move is queen b6. There is one alternative here that you have to worry about. You have to worry about the move pawn to e5, and again, this move is supposed to be a lemon as well. But this move does prevent the move pawn to e5, which makes it really difficult to get rid of this knight. So apparently the remedy here is again to play e takes d5. So it's e takes d5, c takes d5, and the idea is to free up this e4 square for your knight to go to e4 so that you can eventually get rid of the knight on f6 with your knight if you need to. So if, for instance, we play the move pawn to h4, we're planning on continuing h5, and then hg, and then knight e4 at some point should be an advantage. If somebody continues with something like bishop e6, apparently the move queen g5 is supposed to be decisive. There isn't a great move here for black to continue defending his position. For example, queen c7, the knight on f6 is hanging. So they basically have to give you the pawn on e5 if they want to keep playing chess. So like rook b8, queen e5 is supposed to be, again, decisive. This is decisive advantage white, apparently. Apparently white is doing very good here. So e5 is not great, so we have to revert back to the main line. The main line is queen b6. There are people that play rook b8 in this position, and a lot of times that transposes, but it doesn't have to because it does leave the e3 square available for the queen. Queen b6 is a little bit more straightforward for black, and when I have to play the black side of this, this is the move order that I choose, and this should be considered the correct move order. So queen b6, we're going to have e5, getting that knight out of the way, knight d7, then we're going to have h4, basically just playing for mate, playing h5, hg, and we're going to be mating black. So now black's moves have to be very, very specific here. And actually right in here, we're going to be following an Ian Nepomniachtchi when his opponent actually made a mistake in this position. His opponent made the mistake of playing the move rook to b8, which is actually losing. This was Nepomniachtchi versus Mambedov. I'm horrible at pronouncing names. In Moscow, Russia in 2018. But Nepomniachtchi was playing white, and here he continued with apparently the winning move, which is just knight a4. So you have to be careful when you create this battery with queen b6 and rook b8. It has to be done at the correct moment. Otherwise, knight a4 can come in with decisive effect. So the whole point is, after queen b4, we simply play h5. There is no queen takes a4 because we run out of time. Queen takes h4, hg6, and black is getting mated first. So here we had g5, bishop d3, threatening mate on h7, f5, queen takes g5 check, king h8, and then rook h4, hitting that queen and defending the knight via x-ray, d4, bishop takes f5, queen takes a4, h6, and the game is over, and black had to resign. This is a completely winning position for white in every possible way that a position can be completely winning. So, an example would be something like, rook g8, we would play queen e7, which threatens mate on h7, knight f8, queen f6, rook g7, queen g7 would be mate. So there isn't a great way to survive this position with the black pieces, so black went ahead and resigned, and Nepomniachtchi won that particular game. So it's a good surprise weapon, apparently, even on the Super Grandmaster level. Even at the 27, 50, 27, 60 level, this is a very good weapon. So the move Rook B8 is a mistake. The correct move is knight takes E5, and then we're going to play H5, and then bishop F5 is an absolute must, preparing to meet H takes G6 with bishop G6. So we have to play G4 to kick that bishop away. And here black can play like a super clever move. Black can play this move pawn to F6. And this is kind of hilarious. Black is offering up this bishop on the F5 square, and if white takes this bishop on the F5 square, black has a completely winning position after pawn to G5, which effectively traps this queen to the threat knight F7, which now can't be stopped. So black would be completely winning here. So we can't, after F6, we cannot take. We have to play one of two moves. We either have to play Queen D2 or we have to play Queen to F4. So I'm sort of going to do a little bit of analysis for both sides here, because I do play this position from both sides. Queen F4 is not as good of a move as Queen D2. Queen D2 is a very good move. Queen F4 is kind of okay. And the cool thing that you can do against Queen F4 is you can play Rook B8. It does work now. GF5 is no good anymore. Black has a winning attack, so we have to spend a move to play B3. And then we're going to have G5. That's right, forcing white to capture the bishop on F5. So Queen F5 is forced. Queen E3 forks the king and the knight. We have to defend the knight. And now here's the critical move, and it kind of blows my mind. Rook F7 with the threat of pawn to E6, which would trap the queen. So the idea is black had to coax the white king to the B2 square to set up this knight C4 check. So here he's threatening E6, Queen E6, and then Knight C4. And if your opponent is playing the white pieces and they're unfamiliar with this position, if you just played Rook F7 on the board, it's basically a death sentence. It's game over. They don't know how to reply to this. It's a very tough move to find, because you have to find perfect moves from here just to survive. But white actually is supposed to be okay here. You can play Bishop A6 is the best and only move apparently. E6 and then Rook D3, and then you have this EF5, Rook E3, D4, getting the material back, Rook E2, DC3, King C3. Rook D8 is just supposed to be unclear. I personally prefer black from a positional perspective. I just like having this anchored knight on the E5 square that can't ever be dislodged. So I'm a little biased here. But the computer actually prefers white ever so slightly. So I'm just going to call the position unclear and call it a day. It's very close to equality, though. We have about the same material and about the same pieces. But I think it's advantage black. The computer thinks it's advantage white, so we'll call it unclear. So, anyways, the other variation that can be played here is not Queen F4. The other variation that can be played is Queen D2, and this is supposed to be the best move. So Queen D2, what do we do against this? Well, Rook B8 again, pawn to B3, and now we're going to play Knight takes F3, Queen F4, and now this sacrifice, Bishop to C2, King C2, Queen F2, King B1, E5, Queen H6, threatening stuff. We're threatening HG6 followed up with mate. And now the move knight to d4. Now, in the old days, the books gave some bad theory on this. The books used to give this move bishop to d3 to prevent the move queen to c2 check, but this leads very unceremoniously to just a draw, and it can lead to a draw even if white is clever. It still leads to a draw. So the move knight b3 forces a draw by perpetual by force. After HG6, it would force the draw on the spot, like knight d4, knight b5, takes, queen c2, and then just queen c3, queen c2 is perpetual check. Now, white can try to be a little bit more clever, and instead of HG6, he can try to cross up the position with bishop b5, and this apparently is still complete equality. After g5 traps the queen on h6, and then ab, black can sacrifice the rook for the two pieces. And apparently, white has no formation that he can put these rooks in that'll prevent this queen from simply coming to the third rank and obtaining perpetual check. So this is just a draw. There's just absolutely nothing here for white. But the correct move in this position is to simply sacrifice the exchange, to play rook takes d4. and then e takes d4. And this position should be slight advantage white. Now, it's up to you exactly how tricky you want to be here and what move you think black is going to be able to fall for. There's kind of two moves in this position that transpose into each other. You have knight d1 and you have hg6 in this position, and they're both supposed to be equivalent. So my preference is just to play hg6 and threaten mate. It's very forcing. It forces queen e1 check, and then you block. You play knight d1. So the idea is you block with your knight, and it looks like you're just offering him this knight to take with check. And if he takes this knight with check, of course, the game is completely over, because if queen takes d1, king b2, he cannot get back to prevent mate. So no matter how he follows this up, he's dead. So he would have to play something like rook f7, takes, 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 and then you would come back to f4, you're up a whole piece, and you're threatening the rook on b8, and you're threatening the king. That's a completely winning position. If he blocks in the super logical, we'll say semi-human way, if he blocks like this, then simply takes on h7 is completely winning because he can't take back with the rook, and if he moves his king, his rook on f8 is hanging. Or if he moves his king in another way, you could simply queen with check, or even you could simply queen with check. You could queen, and then he would have to sacrifice that way. So no matter what he does, he's basically dead here. So knight d1, trying to get him to play queen d1, and then he should play queen to e4 check. Here you should play king a1, leaving the b2 square open for your knight. Then he should play queen g6, and now white should simply retreat. He should play queen h3, threatening bishop d3. And this position should be considered somewhere between slight edge and major advantage white. White has a really good game from here. White has an easy way to improve his position. And just overall, white is doing pretty good in this position. So that's how I personally play against the dragon. I play the sideline against the dragon, with knight takes c6, b takes c6, and then the immediate bishop to h6. So anyways, I hope you found this video helpful. I hope you learned something new about chess, and I hope you can use these ideas in your own games. Thank you very much for watching.